Okay, Walkers. Today we're looking at Tuesday, September 11th, composition of functions on page 10. So if you would, update your table of contents. All right, now your table of contents are updated. Let's take a look at the notes. Real short notes here. Composition functions on page 10. So you have f, this little circle means of, so f of g, that means g is going inside of f. So f of g of x means g of x, the function g of x is inside the function f, is equal to x, and g of f, meaning f is going inside of g, when you do g of f of x equals x. Now, when you do fog and golf, and they both result in x, we can say that the result of fog and golf is x, then f of x and g of x are inverses. Okay, so if you would update your notes. All right, now your notes are updated. Let's take a look at the examples. All right, now if you notice, I've already kind of drawn some lines to help keep the work organized. If you need to, take a moment to do so. All right, it says using the composition of function to determine if the functions are inverses. Determine if the functions are inverses of each other using the composition of functions. So we have, and I'm going to use color to try to help see this better. I'm going to do f of x in yellow. I'm going to use g of x in blue. Okay, so let's do f of g first. So f of g equals, that means we're putting the function g into f. So the function f is 2, and here's where we're putting g of x in for x. So it's parentheses, g of x is 1/2 x minus 3 divided by 2, and then plus 3. So I'm hoping you can see with color that we put g of x into f of x. Okay. Now we need to simplify. Okay. Now remember, we're hoping for the result of x, because if we get x for fog and golf, then we know they're inverses. So 2 times 1/2 is 1, so that's 1x. 2 times -3 is -6, divided by 2 is -3, and then plus 3. Well, -3 plus 3 is 0, so you're left with 1x. Okay, so far there could be inverses. So now let's do g of f. Equal. So now in this case, we're going to put in the function f into g. So we have 1/2 and we're putting f of x in for x. So that's 2x plus 3 minus, or make sure you use the color, minus 3 divided by 2. So you can see that we put the function f into g of x. And now we simplify. Okay, so we distribute 1/2 times 2 is 1, so that's 1x. And then 1/2 times 3 is plus 3 divided by 2 minus 3 divided by 2. These cancel and you're left with 1x. So since we got x for fog and golf, we can say that f of x and g of x are inverses. All right, so now let's look at example 2. And again, to stay consistent, I'm going to do f of x in yellow and g of x in blue. All right, so let's do f. So f of g equals, so now we're putting the function g of x in for f. So that is parentheses the square root of x minus 5 squared plus 5. All right, so let me just do a side note to explain this. struggling to get a note card here. All right. So what's happening here is I can write the square root of x minus 5 as, there's technically a 2. This is a 1. So I can write it as x minus 5 to the 1/2. If you square this, which is what we're doing, technically we're squaring this. Well, you multiply exponents here. So 1/2 times 2 is 1. So you have x minus 5 to the first power. So basically, this becomes the power of 1. So this becomes x minus 5 plus 5. Well, the 5's cancel, and you're left with 1x. So far, these could be inverses. So now let's do g of f. So now we're going to put in the function f into g. So that's the square root of, so this is where the x, this is the function x, so that's x squared plus 5 minus 5. Well, first off, the 5 and negative 5 cancel, so then you're left with the square root of x squared. Same scenario, this becomes the power of 1, so you're left with 1x. So since you get x and x, we can say that f of x and g of x are inverses. All right, so now let's take a look at example 3. All right, example 3. So again, I'm going to do yellow, blue. So now let's do f of g. So that equals, so again, we're putting g of x into f. So that's negative 3 divided by 2 times 1/2 x plus 3 divided by 2 plus 4. And now let's simplify. All right, so we distribute, that becomes negative 3 over 4x, and then negative 3 times negative 3 is negative 9, and then force plus 4. Now, what you can see here is, unlike example 1 and 2, this is not going to simplify to be 1x. At this point, remember, they both have to be 1x. So since this is not, we can stop here, and we can say that f of x and g of x are not, we're not inverses. All right, so now let's take a look at example 4. Again, we're going to do yellow and blue. So we're going to do f of g. So we're putting the function g into f. So that's parentheses, cube root of x plus 6 plus 6 cubed. And now it's simplified. So here, 6 plus 6 is 12, so you get the cube root of x plus 12. This one not reduced to be 1x. So just like example 3, since you can't get to 1x on 1, you can stop there and say f of x and g of x are not inverses. All right, so at this point, if you understood the example, start working on an assignment. If not, then just know that, again, the 3 models, you can work in the traditional small group, the partner small group, or you could be watching the video. So just, after watching this is kind of just how we need to be in class, and I will see you then, and have a wonderful Wildcat day.